think I'm going to appoint, let's see who. I'm going to appoint the commissioner from the 6th as the junior attorney for today.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
You got a bad attorney, but don't forget the benefits.
That's in section 1-2-0 in your rules of procedures.
Right, right. All right.
They're moving today. So that
I didn't think that was supposed to start until Friday.
they're moving.
Okay, well then I'm going to use executive privilege and appoint the commissioner from the 6th as the new deputized junior attorney.
From his seat.
From his seat.
From his seat.
I object.
Let's see. You want to see if we can find out?
Yeah. Good afternoon. We are here to do the people's business, and there's a lot that's happening. The weather is beautiful today. I'm excited about that, and just excited to be here, to be amongst friends and colleagues. Madam Clerk, I believe that there have been a series of handouts that represent addendum agenda items with one request for an addition. I want to draw everybody's attention to that as presented. And then there are revisions to existing agenda items. While it's not on here, the administrator did send out a transmittal letter, and again, as a matter of record, regarding the budget documents that have been transmitted. Again, you have those that are presented and that are before you right now. This will go to committee on next week. So I just want to make mention that this information is in front of us as well. Okay? All right. Is there any objection to adding these items? I do. Yeah, I do. We'll just add that because you'll speak to that just briefly.
What, the proposed budget?
Yes.
We're adding that as
That's
an
right.
addendum.
We're adding that as well. That'll be addition number 2. I wanted to do this first. Yes. Okay. All right. Let me just go ahead and get that out of the way first. And then we'll turn it over to the clerk so that we can proceed pursuant to the agenda. Madam Clerk?
Okay.
There was no objection.
Yeah, okay. That's what I was looking for. The addendum agenda has been received with no objection for the record.
Yes.
Okay. Call your attention to the invocation portion of our agenda, which will be given by Reverend David B. Hunter, Senior Pastor of the Lutheran Church of the Resurrection. And we will ask Mr. Tyrone Butler, the Executive Director of the Augusta Mini Theater, if he would please lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance. Would you please stand?
I've done this several times, and I confess to having overlooked the obvious. And the obvious is that this is a governing body that begins its deliberations in prayer in a time when that is not the norm. And that in and of itself is a significant statement. But I want to read a little passage from St. Paul. He writes in the 13th chapter of Romans, "Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God. And those authorities that exist have been instituted by God." Paul makes it clear as he continues that we are to give honor and respect to our leaders. Now, someone might be thinking, well, that was easy for Paul to say. He doesn't know our leaders like I do. But I would remind you of a guy named Nero and his 10 successors, all of whom persecuted Christians and the church. It was a deadly thing when Paul lived to be a Christian, and yet he wrote that we are to honor and respect our governing leaders. He said that because he also said our leaders, our authorities, as God's servants. God has placed them in his place in our community. And that might lead us to pray something like this. Father God, we ask that you guide us, that we may be good citizens, that we will obey the laws, that we will take our civic responsibilities seriously. Help us to see each other as equal in the eyes of God, children of God. Warm our hearts and soften our wills, that we may hear and understand each other. And help us together to build unity and to lessen the tensions that divide us. Father, we pray too for our leaders, that they will see themselves as your servants, seeking your guidance, setting aside their self-interest in the favor of the interests of our community and the people, that they may be the leaders you have intended them to be. And I pray that together we will be faithful to your calling in each of our lives. We pray these things humbly in the name of your Son, our Savior and our Lord each and every day, Jesus Christ. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Reverend Hunter, it's always a pleasure to have you come and bless our house. Thank you for those words of Paul, who we study and have learned so much from during his imprisonment on how to be a Christian. By these presents be it known that Reverend David B. Hunter, Senior Pastor, Lutheran Church of the Resurrection, is indeed the chaplain of the day. His spiritual guidance and civic leadership serves as an example for all citizens of Augusta, given my hand this 19th day of October, 2021, Hardy Davis Jr. Mayor. Thank you so much, Reverend.
Would you join me in congratulating Pastor Hunter?
Thank you as well, Mr. Butler. We'll move to the delegation portion of our agenda. Ms. Kim M. Wright, regarding rental housing crisis in Augusta. Ms. Wright, either podium, whatever's convenient for you. Okay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'm here today to speak about the housing crisis here in Augusta. It's very, very disheartening to be one of the numbers being evicted from a home that I've lived in for 4.5 years, to be faced with eviction when I'm not a criminal. There are many facets to being evicted. First, it was just a notice to vacate, and it's gone on and on for 3 months. Augusta has a big problem on their hands, and I'm going to address that first because they need help. They need help from the people. They need help with individual independent landlords. Please look into housing, Section 8, look into affordable housing. See another situation that took me out of my comfort zone. This has taken me out of my comfort zone, but it's my right. It's my First Amendment right to speak my voice and let people know that this is very, very dear to me. Housing in Augusta has been fair, it's been streamlined, it's been balanced. In the last several months, rents have doubled. People who paid $600 are now paying $900 to $1,200. People who were paying $500, I had a lady come to my door yesterday. She was paying $500 for a trailer, and she's being evicted, and her rent has gone up to $900 for a trailer. Not to say anything is wrong with a trailer, but when you're looking at houses and apartments, people are being forced to move into houses that aren't adequate. I looked at a house myself, and it had dirt floors. They wanted $500 a month. I don't do dirt floors. And I don't think a lot of people do dirt floors in 2021. The situation that I'm in is dire to me. They have no rental homes that I can afford. There's no homes on the Section 8 list. And if there are, there's 500 plus people looking at that same house. When you're evicted, you go to court and then you're criminalized. Why? I've paid my rent. My friend Tracy has paid her rent all through the pandemic. And then they want to put me into eviction court. If I am evicted, then I have 7 years to 10 years of this on my record, which makes it impossible to find a home with an eviction on your record. People don't care why you were evicted. They just see evicted, that's it, I don't want to talk to you. Right now, all of our agencies are just jam-packed with people. 211, United Way, everybody. And I'm really disgusted because it's like when things were balanced, when things were equal, you had homeowners that would rent their property, they would know their tenants. I had been with my former landlord for 10 years. 10 years. And I'm faced with eviction. For what? Not only that, I'm being faced with eviction in a pandemic. Just because the moratorium ended doesn't mean that the pandemic is over. You're putting me, Tracy, children, other people in great danger. And I just want the city to be aware that people are really in need of housing. And everybody is not that tenant that you see on YouTube flooding out somebody's house. I live well with the means that I have. And I don't like it threatened. If you look at it, people, all people, have different stories in their life. I could talk about three conditions, all of them. One symptom is sudden death. 3 conditions. A symptom is sudden death. and I'm faced with eviction. If I stay with my daughter, I can only stay with her for 3 weeks. Well, why do you have to stay 3 weeks? Because I become an occupant. Then she would have to evict me, and I'd have to go through it again and again. The temporary situation isn't a lifelong situation for somebody who needs a home. We need a place to live. And why should we be subject to where somebody else wants us to live? If I can find an affordable home in the area that I would like to live and the landlord is willing to rent to me. You have rogue investors coming in this town, people, and they're doing a lot of damage. One company in particular, I'm not going to mention any names, but they're the company that bought my home. They have left devastation in the state of California. Augusta's nothing like California. I left California when it started happening.
Ms. Wright.
Well, okay, I'll close. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak today. This 5 minutes went by very fast. I don't know if I've touched anybody's heart, but for real, we all need to wake up. Thank you.
All right, Chair recognizes the Commissioner from the 3rd. Commissioner from the 3rd.
Oh, sorry. Excuse me, I didn't mean to hit that.
Okay, no worries. Okay. All right. Thank you, Ms. Wright. I wish you had mentioned the investors. I do. That way we ain't got to go searching, finding, looking. All right. Yep. Her name and address for the record. Yeah, Miss Kim Wright. Yeah, we have that.
Yes.
We have it all for the record. Yeah, we have all of that. All right, Chair recognizes Commissioner from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to ask Ms. Wright, did she get an opportunity to talk to the Housing Community Development with the city, Director Welch's department?
All right, Administrator Donald's going to speak to that, and
Okay.
the answer is yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So our housing and community development folks are in contact, and so we are providing services related to this issue. But I believe her comments today was talking about the housing issues around Augusta and how it is impacting her as well as other residents. Is that correct? Yes. So we're providing services now, and she's connected to Director Welcher's group, but I think it's just a good example that there's still a housing crisis, and those funds that we have available are filling in the gaps, but the problem is starting to come to bear.
Thank you for that, Administrator Donald. Ms. Wright's poignant comments are predicated on the state of play around housing and housing affordability, or the lack thereof, in our community. Everything, and we've talked about this before, that we're building, particularly multifamily, is largely market rate. There is that missing middle that is so desperately needed in our city, and the short of it is that we've got a lot of work to do. Chair recognizes Commissioner from the 1st.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I came out of the queue because I believe what you have said and what the administrator have said really speaks to, I think, what we all know. And I would just urge this body to be thinking of what we can do, because Ms. Wright's story was on News 12, and her story is not different from many other stories that we've heard. I mean, we have a young lady right now with children living in a hotel. She qualified for the rental assistance, but the landlord just wanted her out. So, I mean, the comments that we've all made so far, to keep from sounding like a broken record, I think is, the point is being driven home. But this body should definitely sit down and decide by way of a workshop or something of how we can address what we're doing to make housing more affordable in this city. Certainly we can't solve all of the issues, and we can't just throw money at everything, but we need to get intentional about this housing situation. I mean, in Harrisburg, we have been talking about a gentleman who evicted 50 families and is still in the process of evicting 50 families. And that's contributing to the homeless numbers. It's contributing to the work that we're going to have to do later on down the line. It's immoral when people are struggling. So I will submit that, and I will leave it there. But at the end of the day, I think that we should definitely, within the near future, have some sit down about what housing looks like in our city. Our professionals in housing and community development are doing everything that they can, and I appreciate their work to this city. But I think at this point, they need a little help from us, and so does other folks. And so I'll just submit that for the record, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for recognizing.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. Ms. Wright, and to your friend, thank you for having the courage to come and share those comments with us. We appreciate that, and it is not falling on deaf ears. Madam Clerk, I'm going to take a detour, and I want to share a few things, just the mayor's message that is timely right now on a couple of fronts. We're going to hear from our administrator and his team regarding the 2022 budget, and they'll talk briefly about ARPA and the receipt of those dollars. But I want to call to action the members of this commission and urge you to contact our senators to support, and again, I'm urging you to pick up the phone and call our senators that they might support the Cornyn and Padilla ARPA flexibility bill. We've heard our administrator talk broadly about waiting on final rules from Treasury, but one of the critical path items right now is that there's a bill by the senator from Texas, the senior senator from Texas, and the senator from California, bipartisan, to provide cities, counties, states, and tribal governments with additional flexibility under the $350 billion that was included in ARPA. It's ready for Senate passage, and there are a few senators who are arguing that it's time to move on from COVID. I think we just heard from a resident that while we may be moving forward, the issues of the pandemic are still real. The need to help people, they are still real. And so with this legislation, it would allow streamlining and strengthening of ARPA from a flexibility standpoint in three primary areas. It would allow cities to allocate up to $10 million of ARPA funds for the provision of government services without having to deal with the complicated budgetary analysis of how they calculate lost revenue. It would also allow for allocation for cities to be use dollars for separate infrastructure related activities, and as well as emergency relief from natural disasters. I want to urge us to do that, to make the phone call. And on a lighter note, as we enter into the holiday season, today we were presented with the 2021 Easter Seals Christmas ornament. They're always fantastic. And so this year's ornament is the Butt Memorial Bridge. I don't know if those of you who are in the audience or those watching by live stream know the history of the Butt Memorial Bridge and the significance of that very noteworthy character. But Easter Seals is a partner in the community, a nonprofit provider of health and human services. They provide services that help children and adults with disabilities and their special needs, as well as supporting their families. But this is the ornament. I want to encourage everyone to go out and support Easter Seals. And if you have a moment, pick up one of these ornaments. They're available on their website. They're always wonderful to have during this Christmas season as everyone's gearing up and preparing for that. But I want to make mention of those things. Contact your federal senators and urge them to support passage of this bipartisan legislation. And thank you to the Easter Seals for their tremendous efforts every year of presenting the Easter Seals Christmas ornament here in the city of Augusta, Georgia. Madam Clerk, I turn it back over to you.
Call your attention to the consent portion of our agenda, which consists of items 1 through 27. Items 1 through 27. If there are any objectors to any of our planning or alcohol petitions on our consent agenda, would you please signify your objection once the item is read? Item number 2 is a request for a special exception pertaining to property located at 558 Broad Street, the Extended Stay Hotel with restrictions. Item number 3 is a request for rezoning from a Zone B1 neighborhood business to a Zone B2 general business affecting property located at 1215 Flowings Well Road. Item number 4 is a request for a planning petition for a special exception affecting property at 1215 Flowing Wells Road. Item number 5 is a request for a rezoning from a Zone B1 neighborhood business to a Zone B2 general business and a Zone R1B family residential to a Zone B2 general business affecting property located at 3502 Riceboro Road, 1516 Crescent Drive, 1519 Crescent Drive, 1600 Barton Chapel Road, 1604 Barton Chapel Road, 1608 and 1610 Barton Chapel Road. Item number 3 is a request for a rezoning from a neighborhood business Zone B1 to a Zone B2 affecting property at 1215 Flowings Wells Road. Under the public service portion of our agenda, item number 3 is a request for an on-premise consumption liquor license to be used in connection with Soul Food Kitchen located at 471 Highland Avenue. And for the record, Mr. Mayor and members of the commission, item number 12, I think the petitioner is here, Mr. Sherman. Item number 12, the requester, the operator, is advising the commission that the name of AU Massage and Facial Studio has been changed to Augusta Massage and Facial Studio. Do we need her to consent to that? She said she's making. Mr. Sherman.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Have Mr. Sherman, for the record, note that she's.
Mayor, Commissioners, Ms. Schlang,
Yuri Huang.
at the meeting, the committee meeting, there were questions about AU Massage and Facial Studio, if there was a connection with Augusta University. There is not, and the applicant graciously changed the name to Augusta so that there would not be any misunderstanding.
Director Sherman, that change is a change not just locally, but with the Secretary of State's office as well.
Is that changing your LLC? Is your LLC AU? Are you registered?
I don't have one.
She doesn't have an LLC. It's just local.
Okay. Okay.
I think that's it.
Anything else, Madam Clerk?
No, sir. Are there any objectors to either of those planning petitions or alcohol petitions as read? Okay. Mr. Mayor, members of the commission, our consent agenda consists of items 1 through 27 with no objectors to our planning or alcohol petitions.
All right, let's do this then. Thank you, Madam Clerk. The addendum agenda item, the Mayor Pro Tem has an item 1. I believe he wants to add that to the consent agenda.
Yes, sir.
All right, if there's no objection to that, we'll add that to the consent agenda. And for the record, these revisions, again, are to existing items that are on the consent agenda, for the record. Okay? All right. Chair will entertain any motions to add or remove from the consent agenda. All right. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
All right.
pull item 8 and 20, please.
Was that number 20, Mr. Clark?
8 and 23, Madam Clerk.
23?
Again, Commissioner Clark, that was 23, is that correct?
It was 20, in my book, it's item 20, it's the mask mandate.
I thought it was
Okay.
20.
All right,
Yeah.
item 20, Madam Clerk. Okay. Chair recognizes Mayor Pro Tem. All right,
Motion to approve. Second. With the changes as stated.
okay. Voting.
That motion carries unanimously.
Okay, Madam Clerk, we'll go to item number 8.
Item number 28,
8.
8. Item number 8 is a motion to approve placing on probation for a 6-month period the alcohol license and business license for Ms. Natalie Chang Lassick, 7 Mill Entertainment LLC.
Chair recognizes the Commissioner from the 10th.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Sherman,
Yes, sir.
is it my recollection that your motion or your directive was to revoke the license? Is that correct?
What I mentioned at the committee meeting, and what is included in the agenda item, was a recommendation to suspend the license for 90 days and then put them on one-year probation from the point of the suspension. But I also mentioned at the meeting that that would be the severest penalty that we would recommend, and that we wanted to wait until we had the discussion at the meeting, the committee meeting, so that everything that was brought out, anything that the license applicant wanted to say, or his attorney, as well as the sheriff's office. So the sheriff's office, the way these cases typically run with an alcohol applicant, the sheriff's office will meet with them whenever there's an issue to work with getting them into compliance. When it gets to the point where they've exhausted their efforts, or they have an incident such as what occurred, then the sheriff's office will ask that we put it on the agenda for you to make take action against their license. The sheriff's office, Mr. Ortiz is here, recommended that 6 months probation seemed adequate for this violation. At the meeting, you also asked, is this consistent? And it has been consistent, depending on the violation. If it's a shooting, it typically is that we recommend that it be suspended and placed on probation. If it's a less type violation, then it could be just recommendation for probation. Over the years, once we've presented the cases and you've considered what's been presented to you, It could be that you've placed them on probation. There have been, there was a case where similar. There was a shooting in the parking lot. There were different issues going on, and the recommendation was that the applicant meet with the sheriff's department and come up with a safety plan. It was felt that the applicant wasn't necessarily solely liable for what had occurred, and then there have been cases where you've just placed them on probation. Also, there's a case or two where you've revoked their license. Not suspended, but totally revoked the license. So it just varies based on the situation.
Okay, well, a follow-up question. If the 6 months probation stands and there is another violation between now and the end of the probation, what happens then?
Well, if it's a violation that we need to bring it back to you, we certainly would recommend that it be revoked.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Sherman.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Mayor Pro Tem.
Motion to approve.
All right, I got a motion and a second to approve. All right, Chair recognizes the Commissioner from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Sherman, have there been previous violations with this entity, and if so, how many and what for?
If I could ask the Mr. Ortiz to come up here from the sheriff's office, and he can tell you what has occurred before.
Chair recognizes Officer Ortiz. Investigator.
How are you, sir?
Thank you, sir. Yep.
My name is Investigator Ortiz. There was one incident when there was it was 30% capacity, where the people watching the door or the promoter was allowing more than the 30% allowed. Brought it up to the owner who was here, addressed it with him, told him nobody else in, only people out. He agreed with it. He went back to, I think it was behind the bar. I went outside. As I was outside, the promoter was rushing people in. Went back to the owner. The owner took it upon himself to shut down that night. And then there was one incident where, not an incident, we got complaints about people outside just congregating outside the door. Brought that up to his attention, and the very next night I went out there and he had everybody in a line. So anything that we've ever asked him to do, he's done for us.
Follow up, Mr. Mayor. So as I'm looking at this, it appears that there's several violations in this one agenda item that's brought forward. One, underage.
Correct.
Two, a gun in the place.
Yes, sir.
And then three, there's shots fired and somebody's injured.
Yes, sir.
So those are three violations, and your recommendation is a 6-month suspension?
Correct. So my belief is the person watching the door, he was going through a company. They weren't doing it. I think it's personally a failure to manage a place. If he was actually out there by the door making sure they were doing their job, this could have been controlled. He's trying to run a business, trying to be behind the bar, sell, trying to get people in. He's also going through promoters who don't have his business in mind. They have their own business in mind. They're trying to make money. They could care less about his business. I think this 6-month probation is going to be a good wake-up call to him in reference to you need to take care of your business yourself before you try to deal with other people. Because if he's got promoters, and I brought it up to him, promoters don't care about him. They care about themselves. Because if he gets shut down, they're just going to go somewhere else. I think this is a good way to let him know, hey, you need to start taking care of yourself and not take care of all these promoters.
Okay, because I'm relying heavily upon your expertise and expertise of the sheriff's office to help make a decision here, and let us remember that potentially additional lives are at stake here if we are not acting accordingly. Or
so he has gone and got a metal detector, which obviously wasn't being used that day. From my understanding, he has went and got his own security and not going through a company anymore. These people that go to him, they don't go to a company. So he's personally responsible for these people. So he's taking steps to do correctly. I just think he needed this something, basically put him on probation for 6 months to a year, for him to realize this isn't a joke. This isn't a laughing matter. This is something that's serious.
And Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind, I would really like to hear that from the individuals. Is this some young ho? Is that what we're?
No, this is Miss Natalia Chang Lassick.
Oh, Chang. Okay, this is a different one.
No.
Okay. So that's the name.
of the business.
Okay, I'm just trying to get it all right.
Absolutely.
And in any case, I would really like to hear that from those individuals that are accountable and responsible at the end of the day, that what changes that you've made, how you're going to do things differently moving forward, so I can feel comfortable in the vote that I'm going to cast here.
All right, so if you would proceed, let's have the owners of the business please approach. I believe they've got their attorney with them.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Certainly. And again, it's Miss Natalie Chang Lassick.
And Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I believe your specific request was to hear from my clients. This is one of the few times where the lawyer will shut up and let you hear it directly from him.
Certainly.
Yes, hi, I'm Mark Lassick. I'm one of the owners of Suma Young Ho. Yes, we have made changes. We're not going through a security company anymore. I hired security officers that answer to me only. I've I got rid of the promoters. I'm gonna manage everything pretty much myself instead of having promoters bring people to the business. I'm gonna pretty much do my own promotion. But I've cut back on a lot of people that are helping. So pretty much it's going to be me and my wife, and one other person that's pretty much just passing out flyers, which is a DJ, just passing out flyers to get people in there. And we're trying to make the place a little safer, more safe for people. We have a metal detector. They're checking with the metal detector and also patting down. It was always my policy not to let younger people in there or have guns into the place. It was always my policy. And in the security that we did have, I would always go to the door and say, hey, look, make sure no guns come in, make sure no underage people come in. But I had to manage the bar, I had to manage the door, I had to manage pretty much everything in the building, so I couldn't be strictly at the door at all times. But for now, I do have my own security and not hiring out a security company that's managing the door. So I'm pretty much responsible for the security at the door.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just thought it would be prudent to get that on the record coming from the business owners themselves.
Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk, I believe I've got a motion and a second.
Yes,
to approve.
Approve.
Voting.
It's unanimous.
Thank you. Item number 20.
Item number 20 is a motion to approve a resolution requiring masks or face coverings for all Augusta, Georgia public facilities.
Chair recognizes a commissioner from the 10th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to state what I state every time. I want everybody to take all the precautions in the world with this COVID. I think that with vaccinations being up, reported cases being down, I think it ought to be a personal choice if you want to wear a mask or not. Other venues are opening up, other cities are opening up, and we're still going backwards with it. There's I read an article in on the news feed this morning where there's some acts that are booked at the Bell Auditorium. One is going to cancel because of the mask mandate. So people are looking at this, and I think they're wanting to make their own decisions whether they wear one or not. And with that being said, I make a motion that we disapprove item number 20.
Second.
Second.
Okay, hold on. All right, Chair recognizes the commissioner from the 8th.
Thank you, Mayor. Before we vote for or against this item, I think there was a little bit of confusion, and we had to add some dates to it. Did we add an end date to it as well, or?
All right, those are all good questions. All right, so I'm gonna hold on your question. I'm gonna come back to you. All right, I'm gonna ask the commissioner from the 6th if he'll push his button to be in the queue, and I'm gonna come back to you, commissioner from the 8th. Okay. All right, commissioner from the mayor pro tem.
I do a substitute motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. All right, we've got a substitute motion and a second to approve. All right.
I do a substitute motion to approve.
All right. We're clear on that. And a second. And a second.
I'm just
I
trying
understand.
to make sure everybody can hear me, sir.
I understand.
Can you ask Ms. Bond to clean out first?
Yeah.
I hit all three of them.
Okay. All right. So here's what we're going to do. Chair is now going to recognize for the response to questions and to bring clarity to a number of things. Chair recognizes the administrator.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to highlight that the proposed mask and face covering requirement would not impact either the Bell Auditorium, the James Brown Arena, or any of those private activities based on the request of the administrator. While I think I definitely agree with many of the commission that we are moving in the right direction, I think what we've seen nationally and locally, that every time we have success and relax our requirements, then the numbers kind of spike a little bit, and our numbers related to the vaccine, while we've pushed the needle a little bit, they have not made it all the way. And so my request, of course, the commission votes it up or down. I just think we've had some challenges with our staff based on the reports that we provided to you guys. And so with some of the recent tragedy that we've had, as well as the case counts, my recommendation is just for public buildings, and it just impacts the coordination during our normal regular business hours and our delivery of service at these public buildings, not any of the private buildings, nor would it have to do with any of the entertainment activities. And those are spelled out in the draft FAQs that are included in your attachment. So it would not impact any of those commercial activities. And while there is no end date, if the commission would like one, I think we could add one. But it does say that we would review it on a 30-day basis and continue to provide the updates to the commission. As you know, you received one on the 12th, and you'll get another on the 26th. Automatically, you get them every 2 weeks. But the formal update is projected to come every 30 days. To answer.
Right. Thank you. All right, Commissioner from the 8th, I'm coming back to you. Does that clarify your question?
Yes, Mayor, I appreciate that.
Yes, sir. All right, I've got a substitute motion. All right, Commissioner from the 10th. You recognize, Commissioner from the 10th.
Thank you, sir. I just want to be clear on something. Didn't you state that it would be?
Didn't you? All right, so let's ask who you're directing your question to.
To the administrator, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Doesn't this state that it's in public-owned buildings or public government buildings?
Yes, sir.
Who owns the Bell Auditorium in JBA?
We do, but I think the explicit request is that it only be during business hours and that those be excluded. So that's why it's spelled out in the FAQs. So if there is any confusion about that, if we need to make any adjustment to the legal documents, then we could also make those as well if it's the will of the commission. But I think the intent, again, is not to impact those facilities, which is why they are called out specifically to not be included, because we don't want to hurt commerce.
All right, I've got a substitute motion to approve. Voting.
That motion carries 8-2 with Ms. McKnight and Mr. Brandon Garrett voting no.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right. Yeah, I understand. I understand. Yeah, I understand. All right. All right, let's keep moving forward. Madam Clerk, I believe what I'd like to do at this point is let me hear from the administrator regarding the FY 2022 budget.
All right, so Mayor and Commission, first, thank you for allowing the opportunity to come before you and present the proposed budget for FY22. We do have a brief presentation, but also in your packets and now online, the documents are also available under the administrator's page for the FY22 proposed budget. There is a 24-page transmittal letter. We want it to be extremely detailed to be able to ensure that all of the feedback that came back from the commission is included in the transmittal letter, so it's very easy to navigate the budget. In addition to that, there's a brief presentation today. But sticking with the budget calendar that we passed, at the next Finance Committee meeting, there will be a formal presentation, a more formal presentation that shows all of your revenue increases, decreases, as well as the strategy behind providing a proposed budget. And then in addition to that, we have the week of November 3rd through the 10th. As carved out for work sessions and things of that nature. And so I've seen how you've done it in the past, and it looks like you usually take 1 or 2 days where you you speak about the areas for which you have the largest concerns and different departments that you might want to hear from. And so I know that we've kind of already had some of those pre-discussions, but at the next committee meeting, we would set those dates within that week and then move forward accordingly. For today, I think there are some things to kind of highlight. One is to look at your budget over the last 3 fiscal years or your last 2 fiscal years. And there are a couple of items that I thought we should bring forward because the presentations appear to be a little bit different than they have been in the past. So your budget in FY 20 was $938.4 million, your amended budget. In FY 21, which is this year, the amended budget is $920 million. And then the proposed budget is just under $1 billion. And so those numbers, when you adopted the budget, it was at $802 million. And so you've received a ton of grant money and some other things have occurred during that time. But I thought it would be pertinent for the record as well as for you to kind of highlight those activities and why it is presented in that way. And so if you look at this slide, it makes that very clear for FY21. So you started with an $802.6 million budget. There is a variance in between now and then of about $117 million. The reasons for that is number one, under special revenue, you had an increase of a little over 20 million. That includes, let's say, the funds that you got related to HCD, the U.S. Treasury funds, the HUD, additional funds that have come back before you, the ERA funding, the neighborhood development, as well as carryover from fleet purchases, the construction of the DFAX buildings, and to record the sale of a property. And so that's the variance there. In addition to that, in capital, what finance does is once the books close, any carryover for projects that are incomplete, in this case, that would be SPLOST 6 and SPLOST 7 are carried over into the next year. And so that is your variance there. So there are about $21 million in projects that are moving towards completion from both of those. The enterprise fund grew, which is your largest bit of growth, a little bit, about 72 million. So that includes the ARP grants that were received by transit and the airport, as well as the $11 million closure of Cell 2C, which we've discussed before, as well as various encumbrances of about 40.1 million in capital projects that carry forward from environmental services. So that's where those funds exist. And then, of course, the sale of Beacon Station, which again was also brought back before you, is a little bit over $2 million. And so that is your variance of $117 million, which is mostly your capital projects and new grants that were carried over. But if you hadn't seen that before, that might surprise you. Now, I will say one thing that that we will do differently, because the traditional way that Augusta has presented these things, you only see them at the beginning of the budget and at the end of the budget. And in your quarterly reports, that's actually a great time for us to show you what the new money that you've received looks like. And so that's something that we're adding into our updated quarterly reports moving forward. I don't think you've done that before, at least in checking the documents, it doesn't seem that way. It also would help you project what the future looks like. With that, went over this. The FY22 budget kind of addresses the same thing. So SPLOST 7 and SPLOST 8, because SPLOST 6 will be expired, and those projects should come to an end. SPLOST 7 and the new SPLOST 8 is what the increase is based on the GO bond sales for the tax bond for 2022. And then there will be a slight reduction in renewal and extensions from the 2019 bond expenditures. So with that, as well as a 2.5% increase, the budget would rise to the $999 million. And I'm sorry, I left out the ARP variance of about $32 million that would roll over after the current expenditures for Vax Up Augusta, public safety, and a minimum wage. And so the balance of that you would bring into FY22, which are your increases, basically new grant funds from the ARP. Some of the revenue highlights that I just wanted to highlight. So the general fund, again, a 2% growth in the digest. Your sales tax based on the 12-month average. I think we talked about HB 317 last week, where you'll get that additional funding from the collection for Airbnbs and other like products, as well as the new increases that we started to see this past July. Our sales tax growth looks like it will increase by about 3.5%. So of course that's included in the revenue, and our motor vehicle and TAVT, the 3.5% growth there as well, are reasons for the increase. But there are also some reductions that are included. So there's an estimated $3 million when we talk about the judicial split, as well as the court backlog, the Georgia Power franchise fees, which are about $1.5 million under budget, which we talked about. and a decline in interest earning due to the market conditions. So we've budgeted about $750,000 less in earnings. With the market kind of bouncing back a little bit, that may end up increasing. So our revenues may be a little higher, but you want to make sure that you project on the conservative side. Also, we would not receive the one-time $3.2 million in CARES Act funding for from FTA for Augusta Transit. And so that has been accounted for using the American Rescue Plan. And then there's a one-time use of fund balance that you utilized last year to offset a loss in revenues and sales tax. And so that is not included in using fund balance to cover the budget in this year. So a couple of expenditure highlights is that we did include the $3.2 million retention plan for the Richmond County Sheriff. I know that was important to the commission. We also included the planned construction of Fire Station 3, which would again leverage those SPLOST 7 funds to deliver on that project. There's also, as public safety was not only one of the top for our commission, but also for our public, a request from the Marshal's office to make sure that all of the appropriate staff had body cameras, so that now our total law force population would have the body cameras. Also, the Light Up Augusta initiative that we talked about, taking care of the deficit for street lights in both this year and the next, as well as ensuring that there's infrastructure, meaning new lights, at about $4.5 million that can be placed in this year's budget. A $3 million, which is a 2-year commitment, because they could likely only do one within this year, one set of that, but about $6 million total to replace all of the meters so that we no longer have the issue with those high water bills. $5 million in road resurfacing, that's in SPLOST 8 for FY22, coupled with about $1.5 million to implement Pothole Palooza, so that we go through and eliminate all of the potholes in the county. And then provide $1 million for the maintenance and revitalization of parks and public spaces, leveraging the rescue plan, and providing $1 million for blight and affordable housing, leveraging the rescue plan as well, with the additional funding that's allocated for SPLOST 8. I'll hold right there just to mention, we have also looked at, and I think I mentioned it early, that the folks down in Fulton County, they put about $10 million in African American banks because it's in line with the American Rescue Plan. We've actually spoken with 2 of our banking partners here, and in exchange for us providing those receipts, and I just want to make sure I get the names right, First Community and Cadence Bank, if we made a smaller deposit, much smaller deposit than that, and held it, then they would be willing to assist us in implementing some affordable housing and local small business efforts to make sure that our residents who might not normally qualify for housing would be able to purchase homes. They would be able to have that financial literacy, access to capital, and things of that nature, and technically it would not cost the government any funds. Also, I think you know that we have already received the HUD funding, U.S. Treasury funding for the emergency rental assistance piece, and so I believe we're at about $6 million now that we've already expended, but the balance of the second pot would be included in this FY22 piece, rolled over, and so that's included, and the $750,000 investment to make sure that the CVB that lost funds would receive them in this year and the next to recover. And so those are some of the expenditure highlights that are in the proposed budget, but there are many, 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 many more in that 24-page document that highlights it. And so the budget calendar. Here's just a snapshot of what's included from that document that has already come before you. So you've received this presentation today. The work sessions, again, are scheduled in between, I think, the 3rd and the 10th, but I would be requesting that on November 4th to the 8th that we use those days because of existing commitments of staff. And the budget, of course, is scheduled to be adopted on the 19th of November and implemented on January 1st. So that would conclude the presentation.
Administrator Donald, thank you. I'm going to take some questions. I know there are several. I'm going to start with the commissioner from the 7th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Administrator, I have a couple questions.
Yes, sir.
And the main ones, these expenditure highlights that are on this presentation,
Got it.
are you stating that they're already in the budget? Or are you stating their request and this body will approve those requests?
Correct. Yeah, so this is in the proposed budget.
It's already in the budget here that you've
Yes,
submitted?
Sir. Yes, sir.
Wow, okay. And as far as, I mean, some of these initiatives, it's the first I'm hearing of them, I guess, you know, and a couple of that jump out to me is the body cameras for the marshal's office and the CVB for marketing, $750,000. And then the sheriff's department discussion, I thought that we were looking at like they haven't filled X amount of positions, and now we're saying we're not going to do that, and they're going to get $3.2 million?
Yes, sir. That's the proposal. So in balancing the budget, and I would say now in the initial presentation that I did with you on the American Rescue Plan and some of those initiatives, every one of these was included in there. They're actually included in the PowerPoint, and we went over them in the accompanying memos that were there. So those were included. Everything on here was included, as well as the things that are in the 24-page document. They were all included in the framework.
Administrator Donald, if you'll suspend for just a moment, I want to calibrate everyone, and that is with regards to where we are and what's happening today. Pursuant to the calendar that was adopted by this body back in July, what you're having pursuant to that calendar is the administrator transmitting his recommended budget. The only thing that's different artificially than what's happened in the past is you've got all of the documents in front of you right now with a presentation to go along with it. So just for calibration, okay?
Yeah.
All right, continue,
My
sir.
last question is
Keep going.
I have two questions. The debt service of $37 million on the GO bond, what is that? The tax, is that a vote?
I think so, right? It's from SPLOST, right? Yeah, that's for SPLOST 8.
The GO bond sales tax bond 20. Okay. That's
Yep.
okay. Just checking. And then my last question is, I mean, we're jumping 60 million in our budget, roughly. My question is like, does this come back down based on the fact that the American Rescue Plan ends in 24 and we come back to like the 940, or are you thinking that like we're now never getting back down to 940 when we've increased it every year?
These are directly tied to, we probably should have shown even a longer period. You're going to have SPLOST overlap. You're going to have capital projects that weren't done. So the difference, one of the biggest differences are there, because the American Rescue Plan is basically 33 million of that. And so the rest is the first year for SPLOST 8. But what's also included is the SPLOST 6 projects. All of those capital projects carry over. And so once they start falling off the books, that starts being reduced as well.
Okay. And I just think we need to clarify that publicly too, because I think when
Oh,
people are going to
absolutely.
see that, the green bar, and they're going to go, whoa, 60+ million increase. So
Yeah, and so that's
Yeah.
actually, now it's spelled out in that 24-page document. Everybody won't read it in great detail, but there are charts and graphs to try to make it as easy as for folks to get it right as possible. So the breakdown, and that's why it's included in this presentation as well. You can look here and see SPLOST 7 and SPLOST 8. That's $103 million, really closer to $104 million total. And of course, all of the SPLOST 8 money is brand new, so it wouldn't be included. But the SPLOST 7 money is going to fall off after this year.
Gotcha.
When you look at the ARP, that won't fully fall off because it will actually increase within the year, because in July, late July, you will get an additional $41 million that you have to accept into the budget.
Okay.
So there's temporary money that takes it way up, but there's only been a very slight growth in the general fund itself. I think that was 2%. It's around 2.5%.
Yeah, it's
maybe
not
about
much, $4 million.
it's about 2% growth there, and so that's the normal, your general fund. Everything else is special revenues for the most part, and capital projects, which once they are gone and the money is spent, they no longer remain in your budget. Yeah.
Thank you.
So very slight increase in the general fund is what I think you're trying to point out. So we would point that out to everyone else publicly as well.
All right, thank you, Commissioner from the 7th. Chair recognizes Commissioner from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Administrator, in terms of, is November the 3rd and through the 10th, is that the best opportune time for the commission if they say need to make some adjustment by some of these fund from some of these programs, as well as some of the department funding? Is that the best time to do it, between the 3rd and the 10th?
Well, that's what was in the budget calendar, and that's the time frame that you normally do. So we didn't touch it. It can be adjusted, and so that's why it's on the committee agenda for Tuesday, to try to have those conversations as quickly as possible.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Chair recognizes Commissioner from the 8th.
Thank you, Mayor. This question is also for the administrator. In some of your, and I'm going to change the title of your slide where you've got the, the new expenditures. I'm going to say proposed expenditures instead of just expenditure highlights.
Mm-hmm.
In all of these different expenditures, have we also highlighted some of the wage increases that we've been discussing within our departments?
Oh, yeah. So those are fleshed out in that 24-page document. These are just some. I mean, there are, in a $1 billion budget, there are a ton of expenditures. So we just pulled some out just in general. But yes, those are all included. So the ones that are highlighted by the ARP, they don't go into extreme detail. It just highlights, hey, they're about $3.8 million in additional charges that cover that. And then anything else related to that, for example, the public safety bonuses and things, those wouldn't be included because they're actually in this fiscal year.
Gotcha. And just to follow up on that, so this Light Up Augusta initiative, once we implement that and add street lights, backfilling or whatever, what is your mechanism for funding those going forward?
So remember, there are two ways. One, the next 2 years are related to the deficit, but the actual change in the fee structure, that was the discussion, is that those discussions would begin immediately following the budget adoption. And
Gotcha.
so when that occurs, that would be the mechanism. But this allows us to leverage the federal money to create new infrastructure as well as cover the deficit, so that any new fees, they also get a benefit at the same time.
Understood. That's how I remember it too. I just wanted to make sure
Yes,
we were on
sir.
the same page.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, Mayor.
All righty. Thank you to all of the questions. Administrator Donald, to your team, to our finance team as well, and quite frankly, everybody who had a hand in putting not only the notebooks together, but your 24-page transmittal. I want to applaud you. This is fantastic. It certainly gives a very broad overview of the state of our city. It gives a picture of what's happening from a departmental perspective, all focused around our service delivery strategy and how best we can do that efficiently and effective. And I just want to thank you all for the work that y'all have done in putting this together and your timeliness in making it happen pursuant to the calendar. I look forward to the conversations that will persist as we move forward. All right. With that, Madam Clerk, I believe we'll transmit this to the Finance Committee, and it'll be on the next committee cycle. With that, we've got
You're
two more
saying,
items.
sir, that this presentation will be on the are you requesting that?
No. I think it's already,
Oh,
he's going to
okay.
put that on there, an agenda item. There's no action that's needed by us today. Madam Clerk, item number 28.
Item 28 is a motion to allow Gold Cross EMS to execute their right to increase their rates per the MOU to current market rates.
I see the commissioner from the second in the queue.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question for the committee and staff regarding the evaluation of the Gold Cross situation. Was there anything addressed about Gold Cross, the complaints that we're receiving from Gold Cross?
Yes, sir. And I can repeat the question if everyone needs it. The question from the commissioner from the second was whether there were any service issues that were discussed during our meeting related to some of the complaints that we have received. The short answer is yes. So if you look at the attached memo that I provided at the beginning of the meeting, we actually relayed the findings of the EMS subcommittee to Gold Cross, as well as we looked at the service level issues that have occurred, and basically decided that they have received the information from the committee, and of course we would continue those conversations to address them in the proposed future MOU, which does not expire until the end of 22.
So we're saying that we will.
Commissioner, would you speak into your microphone,
Right.
sir?
So we're saying that we really haven't established a procedure, but that's somewhat in the narrative.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So not a full procedure and how to resolve it, because remember, y'all gave us the commission gave us a couple of instructions. One, it was relay what the challenges are and start those conversations about improved service, what the requirement and expectations are. There were 6 items, and I included them in here in the approval letter. And so we went over each one of those areas, but no decision was to be made in the first meeting. It'll take a little bit of time for us to flesh it out. So, and so we've started that process, though. Yes, sir.
One more question, Mr. Mayor.
Continue.
Would it make good sense that we not approve this request to increase their rates until the situation is cleared up?
Well, not necessarily, because I think that we'll be working together to correct any service level issues, and they'll be resolved in the new MOU. And so we've established a point of contact and frequent communication to just coordinate, period, as well as look at the MOU. This request can be looked at differently, though, and so that's why my recommendation is to approve it as written. So the cost of doing business has increased. Gold Cross showed that. We verified and proved that those things, that the cost has increased. The new proposed rates is actually the rate structure that they're proposing and is in process of being approved throughout our region. And so as long as the rates are the exact same, meaning no one is lower than us, then, and if they do become lower than us, then Gold Cross has agreed to enact immediately any reductions for us. So if they agreed to something in another county that's lower than us, then they would have to do that here as well. And so I believe that based on the information provided and our evaluation, that this can be approved and can move forward. The only caveat is that what we also agreed to is that this is a temporary situation because it's based on COVID. The cost could end up being needed to be reduced later on. And so the MOU is the best way to look at that. And so as we look at changing the MOU next October through December, that is around the time we should also look at the rates. And so you would be approving this until that time. So it's basically a temporary increase tied to the MOU.
Motion to approve.
Administrator, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner from the 2nd. All right, I've got a couple of more folks in the queue. Chair recognizes Commissioner from the 10th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to make a motion to approve.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, yeah.
All right, I've got a motion and a second. Commissioner from the 10th and the Commissioner from the 4th. Voting. Furball.
That motion carries 9-1, with Mr. Dennis Williams voting no.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, I believe we've got one more item.
Item number 29
Yes, ma'am.
is a request, a motion for approval of change of control as defined in our agenda item, front load service agreement dated May 4, 2020, Augusta Landfill Solid Waste Disposal Agreement dated March 19, 2029.
Chair recognizes Engineering Services Chairman, Commissioner from the 8th.
Thank you, Mayor. Make a motion to approve as stated, and we need to add one sentence to the end that reads, and for the mayor and clerk of commission to execute the agreements after Coastal becomes the signatory to the agreements.
Second.
All right. Chair recognizes the attorney.
Could Commissioner Garrett repeat his additional language?
All right. Commissioner from the 8th, if you'll read that again for the record.
And for the mayor and clerk of commission to execute the agreements after Coastal becomes a signatory to the agreements.
And for the record, that those agreements would be the agreements to which Coastal would become signatory to, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. For this agenda item, however, Mr. Mayor, they passed out. The consent for change of agreement that you have before you would serve as documentary evidence that the commission has agreed to this consent of control. The additional language that Commissioner Garrett is referring to, this agreement that's before you now will require Coastal to sign on to our existing solid waste contracts and those amendments. There's a little complexity to this transfer. It is my understanding by representative from Inland that Inland will first sell to Lakeshore, and Lakeshore will sell to Coastal. So Coastal will
Orion, not Inland.
By contract is inland.
That's the DBA. Yes. Yes. So Orion doing business as Inland. So Orion/Inland, that's correct? Okay. Therefore, it will be necessary for both Lakeshore and Coastal to sign on as signatories, because even though the transaction would change the same day, legally speaking, it will pass from Orion/Inland to Lakeshore, and then from Lakeshore to Coastal.
I believe the caption reads that, and the clerk read it into the record. The only noted change was what the Commissioner from the 8th indicated.
Yes, I just want you to know there's a separate consent form agreement. It is in there. I helped prepare that to make sure that it was in there. However, that's the consent form, but the signatory also requires both Lakeshore and Coastal to become signatories on the agreement. In the end, only Coastal will be responsible to this government.
Thank you. All right. Everybody's come out of the queue, so voting.
It's unanimous.
This meeting is adjourned.